You're listening to Northwoods Church Matters, a podcast of Northwoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, where we discuss why the local church matters and things that matter to the local church. I'm your host, Matt Higgins. On today's episode, we're going to talk to our lead pastor, Bobby Pell, and church planner Scott McDowell about the topic of church planting. All right, well, welcome back to the Northwoods Church Matters podcast. I'm here with Bobby Pell, our lead pastor, and Scott McDowell. Scott, you have multiple titles, don't you?
I do.
What can you throw them on us?
Yeah, let's see. There's husband and dad.
Well, that's the most important one.
Yes, absolutely, and follower of Jesus. I'm lead pastor at City View Church.
Okay.
And I am a freshly minted church planting catalyst with the North American Mission Board.
Ooh, catalyst. That makes things sound exciting.
It is, man. Let me tell you, it's catalyzing for sure.
Ooh. Well, before we get too much catalyzed, can you tell us about what is your history with Northwoods Church?
Yeah, my mom was actually on the search committee that brought Bobby to Evansville. And
does she regret that?
No, it is a source of great joy in the McDowell home. It's a source of great joy. But yeah, so Bobby and I met right around the time I was graduating from high school, and so had wrestled with a call to ministry and thinking through some of that, and so we connected early on. This was the first church we joined as a married couple. We actually helped hang drywall in the church building across the parking lot here. So this was church home.
Did you write your name on anything in secret in the church when you're hanging drywall?
In the quiet place. Yeah. Sorry, that was a really bad in the secret in the quiet place. Sorry.
Yes.
But yeah. So this is really like our church home.
I understand y'all had a lot of pizza meetings.
Yes, a lot of pizza meetings. Watch some March Madness together.
Noble Romans.
Oh, the Noble Romans for sure. Right across the street from Fifth Third Bank where I used to work. Bobby and I would sit down at Noble Romans. But the most serious conversations were reserved for Starbucks.
That's right. That's where he was kicked out of Evansville.
That's right. In a good way.
Yeah, in a kind way.
Yeah, tell us about the conversation, Bobby, because that's a famous one or infamous one.
Yeah. But, I think Scott was at that point in time just sort of struggling with life and what's next. And, I just sort of had a moment where I said we needed to talk. And, I told him, I said, it's at some point in time you're going to have to, pee or get off the pot. And in this case, the peeing or getting off the pot is a situation where if he feels really called to ministry, then God's called him to prepare for that. And if he's called to prepare for ministry, he needed to go to seminary.
Yeah.
And that would be he had no question about he was called to ministry, but it was just making the decision to leave town to go to seminary was a hard thing. Mm-hmm. And so I just really wanted to encourage him. I believed you're called to ministry. You believe you're called to ministry. Go fulfill that. And you're not going to do that staying here. So that was my challenge to him. And so, yeah, I really encouraged him to leave Evansville.
Which is honestly, it was really helpful. Too many people couch everything, well, do as you feel led, and this, that. It was wonderfully refreshing to have somebody that knows you well say, this is what I see in you. This is what I would encourage you and your family to consider doing.
Yeah, and if you're mentoring somebody in the church, that's what a lot of people want to hear. They need that type of guidance. They don't need another magic 8-ball in their life to just shake it up and just say, okay, whatever. Yeah. They need somebody to direct them. And especially if you see something in a young person, affirm that and go tell them to go do that.
Absolutely. Good. Absolutely.
Well, what did you do once you left Evansville and we kicked you out?
Yeah, so we moved to the Indiana side of the Ohio River near Louisville and got involved with church planting there while going to seminary. Ultimately took a position at First Baptist Church of Charlestown where I was an associate pastor for several years while going through seminary. And then Bobby once again kicked me out of Charlestown, called me and said, hey, there's a church plant. I know you've been assessed and you guys have been thinking and praying about planting a church looking towards Indianapolis. There's a church plant in Avon that never really got off the ground. And I think it could be a really good fit, a really good match. And so, in God's kindness to us, it was and is. And that's the church we still serve today. We moved there in 2012 to begin what ultimately became a replant.
So what does a church planting catalyst do? I know that you catalyze things, but flesh that out a little more.
So our responsibility is to come alongside individuals and churches to help them, and I love that this is alliterated, discover, develop, and deploy planters.
A pastor thought of that.
Oh, my soul, it blesses me a great deal. Yeah, absolutely. And so in many respects, it's just have conversations with fellow pastors. Hey, in your conversations, do you have a Scott McDowell that you're investing in that's wrestling with a call to ministry? What does it look like to help him discover his gift, his calling? How can we come alongside you in helping him develop that? And then ultimately, how do you send him out? Both as a sending church, how do you do that well? But how do you also prepare him and his family to be sent well?
So either one of you guys, this is up for grabs, jump ball question. What is church planning?
I mean, Bobby's the expert. I'm newly minted.
It's starting a new church. Yeah. I mean, it's in most cases it's going from nothing to something, but it's making disciples first, and those disciples that are made form a new congregation that worships and accomplishes the Great Commission of making disciples. It's the biblical process of what we see starting in Acts 2. There was a sermon preached, believers happened through evangelism, and then it duplicates. So every church that starts, that is planted, ultimately they go start another one, is what's supposed to take place when you follow through the book of Acts.
Is church planning easy or hard?
It's very hard.
Yes,
it's very hard, and I also think from a planter perspective, it's lonely, which is one of the reasons why Scott's position really does matter. I've never met a planter who had enough voices that they're able to talk to. They're tired and they're lonely and they need some help. They need encouragement. Even in their best days, they're lonely.
What about for wives? Is it easier or hard to be a church planter's wife?
Oh, I think it's brutal in a number of respects. Typically, because the planter at least has that sense of like, I've got work to do. I've got a job to do, and there's that sense of that's always pulling them out of the bed and calling them out. I think for a lot of wives, certainly not all, but for a lot of wives, they've been uprooted from what is familiar, and they're in a new context now. That same loneliness that Bobby said for the planter exists for her as well, and in some respects, I think is almost harder to overcome because oftentimes, again, not always, but oftentimes they're caring for children and they're managing the home and they're trying to open the home to invite others into the home, and there's not always a lot of bandwidth there for developing deep, sincere friendships. And just that sense of feeling like you're always on. You're always the pastor's family. And it's hard to just be known as, Scott and Jesse or Bobby and Amy or whomever. Matt and Dana. Like, how do you get known just as a person? I think that for their planter's wife, it can be a difficult road too.
And they see the pain of their husband. Mm-hmm. No one knows me like Amy. No one knows you like Dana. I think that's important for us to understand that the person who carries the burden alongside the planter the most is not a deacon or an elder or a board or someone on a church planning team. It's our wife. Yeah. And I think that's a big deal when we sit back and think about it. Not that they have their own burdens and then they're walking with us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget that.
What are some of the biggest challenges when you're starting up a church from the ground up?
If you're new to the community, is just finding persons of peace. Like you've got to find people who say, yeah, I'd like to be a part of starting a new work. When we moved to Avon, Bobby was the only person I knew in Avon. And so, in fact, it's funny. We had a conversation with an older member in our church. We went to dinner at their house, and he said, "Pastor, I'm so sorry that you had to get a second job." And I said, "Ralph, I don't have a second job." He said, "Don't be modest." He said, "I hear you talk about these people that you meet working at Starbucks." And I said, "Ralph, I work at Starbucks. I don't work for Starbucks." Because I told him, and again, like, this is just a mindset shift that people don't understand, especially if they're from that community. If I don't know anybody, and so for me to get to know people, I have to put myself in rhythms where other people are. And so, yeah, I mean, just the initial startup of gathering people and casting that vision for, would you like to leave that which is comfortable and familiar and be a part of something new? That can be difficult.
Yeah, and I think what you hit on is something that we've been talking about in-house, that as we have a challenge at Northwoods Church for people to have gospel conversations with people. And we went through that list on Monday, and the majority of the people that are having gospel conversations, there's a lot of intentionality to it. Like, they're intentionally going someplace in order to share the gospel. And I think that that's a part behind the scenes of church planning that people often don't see. Mm-hmm. That what is a church planner doing from Monday through Saturday? They're going to soccer games, they're going to basketball games, they're hanging out at Starbucks, they're finding a third space in order to connect to people and to make relationships and share the gospel.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that's a significant challenge, managing all these relationships. So, planters are seeking to develop partnerships and sending church, and so managing those relationships and expectations and doing that well, wearing multiple hats. So you still need to be a present and loving husband and father. So I mean, there's the loneliness we talked about. Those are all pretty significant challenges, and they all seem to happen concurrent. It's not as though you can attack one of those. You got to address and attack all of those. Mm-hmm.
And I would say, in your question of what's the greatest challenge in planning a church from the ground up, like with nothing, with no one. We call that parachuting in, because you don't have anybody. I've been able to, by God's grace, see 2 churches planted, and with me as the planter. Man, I don't think I could do it. In both cases that I was the planter, I had 3 or 4 or 5 families. And I don't believe that the way God's wired me, that had I not had the 3 or 4 or 5 families, I don't believe that I could have planted. I'm someone who need 3 or 4 or 5 families in order to plant. And so for the people who parachute in and they plant churches, I don't know what to do other than to stand up and applaud, because that right there is like Jesus' special forces right there.
Yeah.
Well, and many of those guys that parachute in are bivocational.
That's right.
And so you add into everything else we've already talked about. I'm also working UPS from 4 to 9 every morning, or whatever the case may be.
And then I'm getting off work and I'm going to the hospital or making a visit with a family. And then when do you get home and see your wife? I mean, you kiss your kids goodnight, and that's the only time you see them. And it's really hard on some families to do that. Sure. So with that being said, are you encouraged by the state of church planning in Indiana?
I would say there are things that are very encouraging. I had a conversation with a guy yesterday, Kevin Cody, who's planting a church in Bloomington. And his core team he didn't parachute. He had a core team. And his core team is made up of people who have left their jobs in Ohio to move to Bloomington. They so sense the call and need for a plant there that they've literally left good and kindred go and have come here to Bloomington to plant a church. And I find that incredibly encouraging. And he's not alone in that. There's another church coming into Bloomington, same thing, coming from Iowa, and they're leaving family and relationships, and they're moving across the country to come and plant a church. I think that's encouraging. I think that Indiana churches planting Indiana churches is also encouraging. So those are examples of people moving in, but seeing churches from within Indiana plant churches within Indiana is encouraging. Gospel City in South Bend is on the verge, I think, of planting two churches in the next year to 12 to 18 months. So it's an Indiana church planting Indiana churches. Northwoods is planting Indiana churches in Indiana. In a manner of speaking, Northwoods planted our church. Northwoods wasn't our sending church, but had a tremendous impact on the plant in Avon. And so, both of those things to me are incredibly encouraging. Seeing people who are willing to follow the biblical example of leaving behind that which is comfortable for the sake of the advance of the gospel, as well as indigenous church planting happening within the state. Because I think that's far more sustainable.
Yeah, and I say that I'm going to ask this question not to toot our own horn, but we're involved with church planting, right?
Yes, that's an understatement.
Yeah, because there may be some people listening that are on the fringe of Northwoods that have no idea that we intentionally are planting churches.
Yeah, we've been the sending church to 8 churches. 6 of those churches are continuing. So we're at this point in time 6 out of 8, and we are partnering with many more than that. Mm-hmm. And so we have had our hands in literally dozens of plants across Indiana, and so our heart is to see planting go forward all across the state of Indiana.
And that really is a part of our culture that we want to emphasize with people. We are pro-church planting. And if we are pro-church planting, does that mean that people intentionally leave, like we send them out from Northwoods?
Yes.
Is that counterproductive to us?
No. And we talk about this in our Northwoods membership class. We believe that we can grow here at 9920 North Green River Road and send people out, and while sending people out, grow somewhere else. So the kingdom advances somewhere that's not at 9920 North Green River Road, while we believe we can grow here at 9920 North Green River Road. And I believe that that's the biblical example, personally. The church in Jerusalem grew. They were to also go to Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost part of the earth. I believe that's our responsibility. We here in Evansville are to grow, and we're to grow and also go to Southwest Indiana, the rest of Indiana, to the rest of the United States, and to the uttermost part of the earth. And so the biblical example doesn't change for us. Sometimes, actually, where we struggle, and this has been an elder conversation, but is we've not really touched our own hometown very much in addressing some issues. And being able to send people out to do physical things in our own city, you're always looking and saying, what can we do different? But I think our church in this topic, this is our heartbeat.
Yeah, and I feel like we do have a different church philosophy than some other churches. I mean, many churches, their philosophy is, let's find the leadership people, the talented people, the gifted people, and let's hoard them. Let's keep them here for the sake of our kingdom. Really, what we're doing is, to borrow a J.D. Greer phrase, we gain by losing. That we take those people that are the talented people, the gifted people, the people that we see as potential leaders, and we raise them up to send them out. And the kingdom gains by us losing those people. Absolutely. So what are some challenges to church planting in Indiana right now?
Challenges to church planting in Indiana. Well, one of the things I'd like to see more of, if I can say it that way, is an increasing amount of diversity amongst our planters and the strategies of our plants. So one of the reasons you plant churches is the fact that Northwoods can't reach everybody. It can't effectively minister to and reach everybody. There are going to be things that culturally in Northwoods matter here, and other things that, while Northwoods cares about them, maybe just doesn't have the resources or the passion to address. And so seeing a growing number of churches that are diverse, both in terms of what they're trying to accomplish and how they're trying to accomplish it, as well as, if I can just be frank, different races, ethnicities, and languages. The nations are coming to us. I know in our community, we have, just outside my neighborhood, we have a mosque, a Sikh temple, and a Hindu temple in Avon, Indiana. And so the nations are literally all around us. And if we're going to reach them, we need to diversify the kinds of plants that we're putting out. They can't all be, monolithically the same.
Yeah. Is the spiritual climate also a challenge here in Indiana?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. You have kind of we're not the Bible Belt, but there is some kind of just some latent spirituality. Most of the people that I talk to, certainly in our community and having grown up in Evansville, would claim church affiliation in some way. And so, Ryan, a good friend of mine that I've been praying for so long, he's my one. He's been my who's your one for a long time. He's a great guy and a good family man, and he loves and raises his sons well. And in his own mind, there's this disconnect of, but I'm a sinner condemned to hell apart from Jesus. And I think that's a common spiritual temperature in Hoosier land. And then you add to that, you compound that with the nations coming here and the diversifying religious presence in our communities. So yeah, it's an interesting community to minister in.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned racial diversity, because the Midwest is this interesting culture that it seems like every major city has some subgroup in it that's growing right now that you just wouldn't expect.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell us a good story about church planting.
Tell us a good story about church planting.
I know you hear about a lot of bad stories.
Oh, sure. Well, one good story, Bobby and I were just talking about it a little earlier, is Matt Brewer. Matt Brewer moving to Noblesville, planted a church a number of years ago. And I think that they had been on the ground 18 months to 2 years and planted a second church. And it wasn't, we get in our minds this idea they're planting a second church because, well, they have 1,000 people and everything's blowing and going. I think at the time they were running like 120. And they sent out their best leader and some of their best volunteer leaders to plant a church in a community that needed another faithful gospel witness. And God's blessed that church. So at 120 or so, they sent out, I think it was like 30 people. Which again, just looking at the statistics of that, that's a significant chunk of your church and a significant chunk of your giving, serving population of the church. And the Lord's blessed that decision. The church has grown, and they're back up and over that number now. So that's exciting and encouraging, to watch and to celebrate.
How can a local church in Indiana support church planting?
Oh, there's a ton of ways. One of the ways that I mentioned when I was here at Northwoods that I think is immensely valuable and is possible for every church to do is to pray for planters and their families by name, and then to tell them that they did so. Not in a seeking credit sort of way, but you never know. It's remarkable to me the number of times that I have sent a text out or an email out to a planter or pastor. So I just want you to know that our church loves you and that collectively we're praying for you and your family specifically today. Is there anything specific that we can pray for you about? The number of times that has been met with, you have no idea what's going on. Here's what's happening in my family right now. Thank you. Thank you for praying for me and my family specifically. That doesn't require an adjustment to your budget. It doesn't require any massive anything. It just requires intentionality. And so every church, every follower of Jesus can do that. So that's a significant way. Yeah.
And they can get your email address to get that list.
Absolutely.
Through, it's S. McDowell, McDowell, 2 L's, at NAMB.net, NAMB.net, so that they can get the list of planters to pray for.
Yeah, you can get the name of the planter. I'd encourage you, we live in a social media world. Follow planters. So, you don't have to follow every planter on the planet, but, follow 5 or 6 of them and get to know their stories, and you see pictures of their family and their wife and their kids, and just genuinely care about them as a human being. Like that, I think that is a very underrated but immensely accessible tool that every church can do, and every follower of Jesus can do. Another thing I would commend is get connected with churches like Northwoods that are active in church planting, and say, hey, what are you all doing? Can I tag along with you and just see, what you're doing. What is that relationship like? Next time you meet with one of your planters, can I just tag along and just see how you're encouraging or how you're sending or shepherding? And then we have trainings for sending churches. You can get involved financially. There's almost an endless supply of ways you can be engaged and involved.
Bobby, how would you answer the same question? How can the average person at Northwoods support church planting?
Now, pray, give, go. I mean, I would say, I think it's a great idea about praying very specifically by name. I think, giving to our missions offering is a big deal. I also, Bobby Cox is our church planter at Community Central, Matt Castro, our church planter at Redeemer Fellowship. We're going to be planting again. I just don't know where else. I don't know what's going to happen around the corner. But, send these guys a gift card. Be a blessing to them. We are financially supporting them right now. But, just know that there's always an opportunity to be a blessing to them. And when we give an opportunity of whatever the next church plant is, honestly pray about, should you be a part of it?
Yeah, because there will be a next one. We're not going to stop church planting.
That's exactly right. And the way we do that is, this happened with Matt Castro, it happened with Ryan Moore, it happened with Scott Farmer with the Center of Hope, it happened with Kevin with Grace and Truth. Every one of our church plants is that the church planter got up and cast vision. And when they cast vision, they said, we invite you to come and be a part. And then I followed them and said, that's the truth. We invite you to go and be a part. Not knowing would 100 people leave or 2. We meant it. And in some cases, we had as many as 50 people leave to go to Center of Hope. And in some cases, we had none. And when it was none, our hearts broke. Yeah. When it was 50, to be honest, that was a hurt. But we recouped. Mm-hmm. And the church, we're fine. And Center of Hope today is a church that's now running a couple of hundred people and reaching a community in downtown Evansville that we would have never reached. And we celebrate that. I mean, they're running a couple of hundred, and every Sunday after their service, they're feeding the homeless. We don't have that. We don't have that bandwidth.
Yeah.
And so, praise God for that.
Yeah. And just to be crystal clear, what we're saying here, we hope people leave Northwoods to go plant another church.
That's right.
We want you to be part of church planting, and we actually rejoice when you make that decision, because we're more interested in the kingdom of Christ than the kingdom of Northwoods. We're not just here to build our territory and our borders. We're here to build Christ's borders. Any questions that you would ask of Scott, Bobby?
Yeah, I would just say, really not a question, but I would say this. I would say thank you for what you do. I worked for the North American Mission Board for 3 years, and one of the things that I learned in that process is that working with the North American Mission Board, you often don't hear thank you. Mm. And I know that you're new to the role, but I would just say to you, on behalf of Northwoods, thank you for what you do.
Appreciate that. Thank you for what you all do. It's a tremendous encouragement to witness and to champion and to partner with you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in today. I got a hankering for Noble Roman's Pizza for some reason. I don't think they exist anymore, do they?
Nope. No, we put them out of business.
Bobby and I ate all their pizza.
Y'all are to blame. Thanks for joining us today on the Northwoods Church podcast. If you'd like some more information on our ministry at Northwoods Church in Evansville, Indiana, please visit us online at www.northwoodschurch.org. Again, that's www.northwoodschurch.org. We'll see you next time.